Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Officials say that over 10,000 federal employees may have access to a program which spies on Americans. They also confirm that the government analyzed data of over 3 million people inside of the United States. Here are the highlights from this week's hearing.
The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, gives intelligence agencies the power to conduct surveillance on suspected foreign spies. However, bipartisan concerns have been raised because the program also has the ability to collect information about U.S. citizens. On Thursday, a panel of 3 witnesses associated with the U.S. Office of the Inspector General testified before Congress. The 3 are responsible for oversight of FISA. The House Judiciary Subcommittee grilled them on details surrounding the program. Last year, a report revealed that the FBI had made more than 3.3 million queries of Americans under FISA authority. The DOJ Inspector General confirmed that number and that also that many of those searches were conducted in error.
It's obviously very concerning that there's that volume of searches, and particularly concerning the error rate that was reported on in the last 2 years in the public reporting.
Now, and that error rate was what?
I believe it was around 30%. I think, fellow members, I think it's around 30%.
Well, 30%. I'm a lawyer, not a mathematician, but 3.4 million, about 30%. You're talking about 7 figures of error in terms of these searches. I'm wondering.
The congressman went on to ask how many people can perform these searches and access data on Americans through FISA. The 3 witnesses couldn't provide a number, but did say this.
If I represent to you that we believe there may be north of 10,000 people in the federal government that can perform those queries, would anyone here have a basis to disagree with that assessment?
No.
Many Republicans are now calling to abolish FISA, and the issue doesn't seem to be partisan. Democrat Jerry Nadler said this in his opening statement.
Today, this committee finally gets back to the serious work of keeping Americans safe. Safe from those who seek to do us harm, and safe from those who might trample on our civil liberties in a quest to keep our country secure, no matter the cost.
NTD reached out to the DOJ for comment, but didn't immediately hear back.
America's top Catholic advocacy organization is taking action against alleged weaponization of the federal government. CatholicVote.org has filed a lawsuit against the FBI and the Justice Department for targeting Catholic Americans and Catholic churches. Joining us next to discuss this issue, we have Brian Burch, president of Catholic Vote. Brian Burch, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
Brian, if you could just kind of give us an overview here, what prompted Catholic Vote to file a lawsuit against the FBI and DOJ?
Well, I think we need to remember how this all came about. Back in January, someone in the FBI was so disturbed by what was happening that they leaked a memo to the public that then went viral, and of course has prompted a congressional inquiry and now our Freedom of Information Act request, where we are asking for copies of documents and communications related to a memo that essentially authorized the FBI to go into Catholic churches and begin spying on them, to set tripwires and to gather source material, at least under the purported guise of right-wing violent extremism that they claimed could be present there in Catholic churches.
Wow. So how do you think the FBI began to sort of evolve into this, I don't know what you would call a policy or a quiet policy of targeting Catholics, and what criteria do you think they're using to do so, if any?
Well, it's a great question. All we know is what's been turned over to Congress and that was in this leaked memo. And the memo cited as the only reason a document by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which of course is a discredited left-wing extremist group that goes after conservative organizations and claims they are hate groups. But your question is important, and this is exactly why American citizens have a right under the Freedom of Information Act to request these kinds of documents so that they can uncover and understand exactly what's going on. Which is precisely why we filed this and why we, unfortunately, were forced to file a lawsuit here, because the administration has refused to respond to our legal request for these documents.
It appears as though this case has caught the attention of the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the House, Jim Jordan. What efforts have been made from that angle to uncover this information about the FBI's potential targeting?
So we are on a parallel track. Of course, we're very interested in what Congressman Jordan and his committee is able to uncover. He has now subpoenaed the head of the FBI. They've received limited information in their own subpoena, a highly redacted document. Although even in that document, it revealed this was not simply a rogue agent. This was a document signed off by 2 supervisors and then distributed to other field offices. And so while Congress does its job and hopefully is able to get to the bottom of this, we are fighting on behalf of Catholic citizens and, frankly, all concerned citizens over the question of whether our Department of Justice and the FBI in particular are overstepping their bounds here, particularly when it comes to religious believers and people going to church.
And to your point, there's just so much happening throughout the country and the world, frankly. If you could just kind of remind us or give us an update, how has the DOJ responded or been responding to violent attacks against pro-life organizations and Catholic churches?
Well, again, a good question, because in many ways this is related, in our opinion. You have over 300 Catholic churches that have been attacked over the last 3 years since May 2020. Vandalism, desecration of statues. We have churches that have been firebombed. Same thing, by the way, with pro-life centers. And the Department of Justice, unfortunately, has done very little to practically nothing. They've prosecuted 2 that we know of incidents in this regard. Meanwhile, compare that to what they've been doing to pro-life Americans like Mark Houck in Pennsylvania, where the FBI sent a team of armed agents that broke into his house and arrested him and was forced to undergo an extensive trial in order to exonerate himself. He was an innocent man, and a jury took less than 1 hour to acquit him. And so, yeah, we do believe that the Department of Justice, unfortunately, has been weaponized for political purposes, and the FBI, frankly, has its priorities wrong. We don't tolerate and should not tolerate domestic extremism in this country, but where it seems to be largely occurring right now is on the radical left, not inside of Catholic churches, by the way.
Brian Burch, president of Catholic Vote, thank you so much for sharing this story with us.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill today putting pressure on the White House to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for selling solar panel parts, oftentimes made with forced labor, to the U.S. A growing number of Democrats are questioning the Biden administration's freeze on tariffs in the name of ramping up the solar industry. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the details.
On a vote of 221 to 202, the House voted to overturn a Biden administration rule on solar imports
that allowed Chinese solar manufacturers who use forced labor to dodge American trade laws and dump inferior product on the United States.
This resolution is to force Biden to reinstate tariffs on solar imports from Southeast Asian countries, which use parts made in China and oftentimes reportedly made with forced labor.
80% of the polysilicon capacity, 80% of the solar panel manufacturing capacity, that's all in China. So they have enslaved Muslim minorities working in these factories, and the factories are all powered by coal. They're kind of relaxing their moral guidelines in order to increase the amount of solar.
The administration waived the tariffs as a way to ramp up solar power in the U.S. Those who opposed the resolution say it would
harm our endangered planet. It will handcuff us in our fight against climate change.
But other Democrats say the exact opposite. Senator Sherrod Brown saying, frankly, the president got this one wrong, highlighting that American solar manufacturers are often forced to compete with cheap labor from China. Senator Rick Scott, who's leading the Senate effort, applauded the House's passage, calling it disgusting that Biden's actions would shield Chinese solar companies, many of which are using child and slave labor, and allow them to circumvent U.S. trade laws. There are a handful of Democrat senators who have expressed support for overturning President Biden's rule. It is expected to pass the Senate next week with bipartisan support, but President Biden says he would veto it. Under this circumstance, supporters of this resolution would need to shore up a bit more support from lawmakers, specifically 2/3 of a majority, in order to officially override President Biden's veto. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
The annual White House Correspondents Association dinner taking place tomorrow night, right here in Washington, D.C. President Biden is expected to attend, as well as many other well-known people in media and beyond. Comedian and Daily Show correspondent Roy Wood Jr. is hosting this year's event. Movie star and former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger also plans to take the stage. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden also set to be in attendance for the second consecutive year. The event was canceled in 2020 and 2021 due to the pandemic, and former President Trump took a pass on the dinner, largely in part to his contentious relationship with the media, whom he often dubbed fake news media. The high-profile event has been held annually for over a century. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.